All right. Hello. Good morning. Good afternoon. Whatever time it is for you. Welcome back to the show. It's Christine Jewell. And today I'm joined by Daniel Leckie from Hatch for Hunger. He's the CEO of Hatch for Hunger. And I'm excited about this conversation. I recently met Daniel at one of our Thriving Leader events out
Mhm.
in Kansas City. And they're just an awesome organization. I love what they're doing as a mother of six kids, three of my own, three through a blended family, as a former integrative nutritionist and holistic health coach, and just knowing the importance of nutrition, teaching our children healthy habits, getting good food in the hands of people. I'm just really drawn to what you guys are doing as an organization. So I think today's conversation is going to be a really great conversation around kingdom impact, what it means to follow your calling, to step into bold leadership where God is calling you to do things that light your heart up and really make a difference in the world. And also, I want to talk about the mission of Hatch for Hunger and what they're doing and how you guys can get involved. So, without further ado, I'm going to introduce Daniel officially. Danny, he leads a national not for profit organization called Hatch. I called it Hatch for Hunger. Is it Hatch or Hatch for Hunger?
Both work.
Both work. Hatch is focused on being the most reliable source of animal protein to hunger relief organizations nationwide. They're serving 36 states, 100 plus food banks, and they're bringing a new era of nutrition security. You guys, listen to that. You hear me talk about new era all the time. We are in the new era. Prior to his time at Hatch, Danny held roles in sales, marketing, product management at Corteva AgroScience, and he is a husband, a father to three children, and an avid golfer. Danny, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you. What a warm welcome. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I love it when people are doing good things. They're
Yes,
disrupting the norm. They're in the new era of leadership. We're zigging where other people are zagging. So I'm all about it.
absolutely. Yep, me too.
So let's talk a little bit about Hatch. Just we'll start out the gate. I want to, just share a little bit about what you guys are doing, and then I would love for you to share a bit more of your backstory. As we talk further about how you guys came into this, how you and your wife made some of the decisions you made, because I know
Yeah,
they weren't easy decisions. But first of all, uh, I have written down here what began in 2015 as two employees in a truck has
yeah,
grown
that's
into
right.
a national operation functioning 31 states, serving over, well, I guess this said 80, but we said 100 now,
Yeah,
food banks and pantries. And I know you guys have a pretty awesome mission and vision. So tell us about that.
yeah. So we were really born out of this idea to connect farmers to food banks, in particular around animal protein. We saw that less than 2% of all the food going to 200 food banks and 60,000 pantries was animal protein. And we felt like that type of nutrition was missed. It was needed. We needed to find a way to get it to the families who needed it. And so we built this idea, we built this mission. We want to be the most reliable source of animal protein for those partners so that families every week, adults, children, the elderly, when they go to a food pantry, there's always the choice to choose eggs, chicken, milk, etc. Right? All the healthy food items that are quite expensive at the grocery store. And it really was started out of this idea of a delivery truck with two employees.
Mm,
Um, and it was really the vision was casted by our founder who had an experience in the early 2000s, and he was able to make connections within the egg industry to find that there was extra and there wasn't a market for certain products, right? A medium egg or a small egg or a drumstick. Um,
yes.
and so finding those avenues of where we could help not only create value for the farmer, but then the food banks and pantries, and then ultimately the people who consume the food at the food pantry, the food insecure.
So good. So many things I love about that. First of all, like I said, as a former nutritionist and
Yeah.
just knowing how important protein is, high quality protein. I mean, that is what our cells are built out of. And, as we think about what are our kids getting, what are most people getting that is just processed, refined sugars, it's dead food,
Yep.
and we're not just talking about, we're obviously talking about feeding so people aren't hungry, but we're talking also about long term impact on health and our healthcare system.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we see it in our children, and we want to try and change the eating habits of children by age 9 for this very reason. We see that 4 out of 5, say that again, 4 out of 5 households are buying highly processed, highly shelf stable food. Whether you have the money or you don't, that's where 80% of Americans are putting their money and putting their effort into. They're buying the wrong kinds of food, and we want to change that, especially for those who are most vulnerable in our communities.
Yeah, so good. I love that. I know so many times, even when I go to the grocery store and they're like, do you want to donate to such and such? It's always like about boxes of mac and cheese or
Hmm.
Cheez
Hmm.
Its and stuff. And it's, on one hand, you're like, man, no. I often say no. And then I'll go and we'll do, a different run to our local pantry because I do. I'm like, I want to stock it with real, healthy, good options. I don't know if it's in demand, but
Yeah, it's certainly necessary, right? I
I
think
love
talk
it.
about being disruptive. One of the things I would love to disrupt, and I don't want to be controversial about this, but
Oh, we like to be
when
controversial. Let's go.
school food drives, right? It's
Yeah.
all highly processed, shelf stable food. It honestly, I think, would be better if we started to do more raising of funds for nutritious food than sending kids to school with cookies and mac and cheese and all the things that are really cheap at the store that families feel good about providing for a food drive. It's like, why don't you just give it? Because the buying power of the food banks is so much greater than that
Yeah.
$1 to
Yeah.
get the type of food that families need. So you talk about, how grocery stores do that. I would just love to see the roundup, the money go directly to the food bank to do what they need with it.
Mm.
And I think that food drives at schools and other places have a great meaning, great purpose, great learnings for children, but ultimately maybe not the best for the food insecure who receive the food.
So let me make sure I got that right. So if people give directly to the food banks, their buying power goes longer and they can make those dollars go way further versus just buying random bags of, hey, here's a whole bunch of chips and a whole bunch of mac and
That's
cheese
right.
and stuff like that. Okay, that's good to know because I think people generally like they want to help, but they're like, I don't, we don't get educated. You don't know what you don't know, right?
Right. Yeah. And food banks are great about putting that on their website. Hatch, we try and do that as well. But typically a dollar could equal 10 meals if a
A
food bank uses
dollar
that
could
dollar.
equal 10 meals.
Right. And so we look at even what we can do. And if we can get chicken for, you may buy it for several dollars at the grocery store, but we can get it for well under 50 cents a pound. That's a way different ratio. That's an outsized impact that hunger organizations can have that other people can't. So don't mean to derail us there, but I think
Oh, it's good.
those that you just brought up a point that kind of sticks with me for sure.
Yeah, no, and I think we're here to be disruptors. I think we're here to interrupt the regularly scheduled program that is
Yeah.
broken in these different areas of influence that we've been called in. Obviously, you've been called into the food industry, and
Yeah.
it is a huge problem. Like so much of our disease, the sickness that we have, autoimmune disease. I mean, I owned a holistic health and performance studio for 10 years, and even people who could afford food, they would come in riddled with autoimmune disease and
Hmm.
sickness
Hmm.
and taking all kinds of prescription medication, can't think, can't focus. My kid's got this diagnosis, my kid's got that diagnosis. And it's like there's such a push to just medicate and just
Yeah.
keep pumping more of the processed stuff out. And I do believe, like, whatever, this is just my belief. So whoever wants to be offended can be offended. But I believe like it's time for a radical wake up call. And for those of us who are educated and have the means to come together, because I mean, obviously, I'm passionate about it. This as a mom, I know also that the kids can't think. They just don't have the energy. They don't have the focus. And now we're
That's
making
right.
it about their inability or their learning disability when it's actually maybe a nutritional issue.
Yeah. Well, and consider the fact that if 1 in 5 children are food insecure today, which is what the statistics would tell you, that's
Right.
20%. Could you imagine being chronically hungry or chronically hangry at school
Yeah.
and at home? You're not going to be very pleasant. You're not going to learn. You're going to be distracted. And that's kind of what we are trying to address is those proteins, the animal proteins that are going to keep bellies full longer, that are going to let somebody feel better, and they're not going to be chronically hungry or hangry. Because I know how I am, and I know how my kids are if they get
Yeah.
chronically hangry, and it's not a good feeling.
It's not a
And
good feeling.
there's an entire population that feels that nearly every day, and
Yeah.
that's unfortunate in 2024, without a doubt.
And I'm harping on this nutrition thing, y'all, for a minute because I'm big on vitality. God created us to thrive, not to survive, not to be, and there's more than enough. So, two things I want to say, and I want to throw it back to you is eggs. Like, I was blown away by the numbers you gave me of what, like, the how far it can go with eggs. And I always used to say to people, like, egg is like the perfect food. It's the perfect
Hmm.
protein. It
Hmm.
has all the amino acids. It's got a great ratio of protein and fat. Even just being able to get more eggs into people, like what it does for their brain, what it does for their health, like it's so powerful. And I think I remember you saying $75,000 creates 12 million dozen eggs or something like that. Did I make that up?
Yeah, 12 million eggs,
12
a
million eggs.
million dozen. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Just by
That's a
harnessing the
lot.
power of what we know that the food banks can do and what their budgets are and how we can help lower that cost. We can help spread that out to really make a bigger impact so that more bellies are full, more children learn what it's like to eat an egg, for sure. So there's outsized impacts when we get into this situation.
So good. So 75K, not, I mean, in case anyone wants to donate that,
Yeah,
but
right. Yeah,
75K, a million dozen eggs. That's a lot.
it is. Yeah, and we have the case study to prove it, right? And we have just changed communities
I can
with
imagine.
this opportunity that they can go every week and expect that there'll be eggs there. And we looked at the savings that that created at the consumer level at the food pantry. So people who got the eggs from us last year. Overall, in 2023, families saved $28 million by getting eggs at a pantry at no cost versus buying them at a grocery store.
Yeah.
So,
Especially when you think at a store they're like $7 a dozen or something
right,
crazy.
right. We've had some very high egg prices, depending on, even conventional eggs have gotten pretty high.
Yeah.
But you look at it and you say, wow, like an organization like Hatch for Hunger put $28 million back into the pockets of the food insecure because they didn't have to buy those eggs.
That's
That's a
huge.
big deal.
That's a big deal.
That's a
Yeah.
game changer.
Yeah. So the other thing that I loved, and I wrote a little note about this because I wanted to circle back, was really that a lot of this protein is coming from surplus, from overflow. And I wanted to highlight that because I think we always hear like there's not enough, there's not enough, there's not enough. And the reality is there's actually more than enough. We're just not utilizing the resources we have while we're not stewarding. And this is a thing that's near and dear to my heart is really being stewards of the
Hmm.
abundance that we have. So I'd love for you to just even talk a little bit more, expand on that, because it really reminds me of like Jesus multiplying the loaves of fish and
Yeah.
or the loaves of bread and the fish is like we
Yep.
think, man, there's just not enough, and we don't see how much is actually being wasted all
Yeah.
around us.
Yeah. We certainly don't have a issue of food. We have an abundance of food. It's more a logistics issue, as well as a cold handling and storage issue, right? So we talk about, there's more eggs, there's more chicken, there's more, you name it, fish, there's more produce, right, than anybody can handle, more than the grocery store can handle. And these food banks and food pantries are getting, food from the grocery store when they're called and said, hey, we have extra, and they get it and it's outdated and it's short dated,
Yeah.
right? But there's plenty of good food that isn't on the brink of being spoiled, right? And a
Hmm.
lot of it is just simply, and this is something that we've tried to do at Hatch, is address these issues head on. There's a logistics issue. So we've got really good at logistics, right? How do we get fresh product from point A to point B? And there's a cold storage and handling issue. So now we start to look at, well, how can we provide coolers to the
Hmm.
food pantries so that they can accept the food? So it doesn't go into a landfill, it doesn't go to waste, and so that they can say yes. Like we want to eliminate the barriers for food banks and food pantries to accept the food because we
Yeah.
know it's available.
Yeah.
We've only been doing this on a large scale for the last 3 years, and we went from 80,000 dozen eggs in a month to our biggest month being 1.5 million dozen eggs delivered in 1 month. If that tells you anything about how important it is to understand and utilize logistics and cold chain to your ability, that shows it, right? There
Yeah.
is the product available, and it is not a lack of food issue for sure. It's more of a handling and how do we convene it and aggregate it.
Yeah. So we're talking about, really you're talking about getting more freezers, more coolers,
Yeah.
more refrigeration into local pantries. Again, not a problem of is there food, because you hear that a lot, especially on the media. There's not enough. And it's like, well, no, we just get to get better at getting it into the right places and eliminating the friction. Like, what is the point of friction that's there? So I just encourage anyone listening too. I don't know. Have you checked out your local food pantry
Yeah.
lately? Have you gone there not only just maybe to give, but to, as like as if you were a client? Like, what do you see? Right? If you are going there to have your own experience, is there refrigeration? Maybe that's something you can get involved with. I know that's a program that you guys offer,
Hmm.
being
Hmm.
able to donate towards that. Can you talk about that for a second?
Yeah, so we last year initiated a cooler program. We have delivered during that time 50 coolers. The most recent campaign delivered 36. Those 36 coolers are in 17 states, impacting 36 different pantries. Each cooler can hold 2,000 pounds of fresh food. It's amazing, right? We overnight create 72,000 pounds every month of new space for people to accept nutritious food for their
Wow.
clients and for their pantry. Those 36 coolers are providing this access to 107,000 unique individuals every month. That's over 30,000 families and over 100,000 people every month that now have better access to nutritious food. And that's just 36 coolers,
Yeah.
right?
So
There's
one cooler
60,000
does roughly
pantries.
what?
What's that?
What does one cooler in one location roughly do for that community?
It'll help provide for that community 2,000 pounds. Then they can turn over as many times as they want. And that costs about $4,000.
Yeah.
Depending on where in the US, it could be $4,000 to $4,500. But you can create a lasting impact in your community by providing a gift of a cooler, especially rural communities.
Yeah. I just we were so excited, and I'm not saying this, oh, we have a cool. I mean, we would definitely want to do more with you guys, but I was like, wow, just I mean, 4,500. Some of y'all listening, that might seem like a lot to some people. A lot of people listening, that's nothing.
Yeah.
That's less than you would spend on a vacation easily for a weekend getaway sometimes for people, and you can literally open up a portal of getting food to people in a community like that. And you can, and it's again, we become conduits. I just want to speak about being a conduit, right? You don't,
Mhm.
sometimes we're like, do I need to go to the food bank and do the serving and do this? And maybe that's what you're being called to do, but how else can you just be a conduit to help, right? Be able to
Yeah.
help.
Yeah. I mean, how
So,
do you use your time and your treasure, right?
yeah, so good. So let's talk about. I was looking at your. I love the fact that you guys, first of all, high five on the leadership. We always talk about having your vision and your mission and your values up, and I know that you guys breathe it and walk
Hmm.
it, but it's awesome to see that. And I pull them up and I saw that, you've got your values here. The one that really jumped out the page at me is generational change. So
Yeah.
passionate about this because it's like, okay, I'm all about breaking chains of
Yeah.
addiction, of slavery, of just generational drama, trauma, poverty. Let's talk about this value that you guys have of generational change. Why is it so near and dear to your heart? What does that mean for you guys? Like,
Yeah. Well, the unique part about our values that we kind of live and breathe, right, is that the team decided on those values. So
mm,
we have a small team. We came together at one of our quarterly meetings and we just started to put all the different things, all the different values that we felt that we were,
mm,
providing as a service and what we believed in ourselves and this organization. And those were the four that rose to the top. And I love the fact that the team helped select those, that we have the buy-in. This is what we do. I think it really connects us to our mission and our vision.
mm,
Generational change is so important because, one of the things we talk about so much is changing eating habits of the children by age of 9. Why is that so important? Because you can effectively change the generations before them or after them
after
rather.
them.
And what we see is that individuals who are affected by food insecurity, that goes and spans 3 generations. And the only way that we feel like we can create this generational change is insert proper nutritious food, give them the opportunity to have the choice and have the full belly and have the proper eating habits and be healthier and live a life that's full of dignity and that they're empowered. We're empowering families through this food to feel like they deserve it, right? I can have the same food that my neighbor has. That helps create and eliminate, hopefully, poverty, right? Which is one of the root causes of this. And so the fact that we want to change the next generation, we say that we hope we remember, and the people who receive our eggs remember the day that our egg carton, we have a hatch egg carton, showed up in their house, right? And they remember that day 30 years from now, and that changes the way that they lead their lives. The next generation
Mm.
of civic leaders, of doctors, of politicians, of teachers, we change the trajectory of their lives because we want them to not be succumb to that three generations that are affected by food insecurity. And so that one is really important for us because we do have a strong belief that animal protein is not the answer, but it allows you to kind of address some of these other issues, right? If you are feeling full, your mental health may not be as, impacted. Your actual physical health, right, can start to see different changes. Your performance in school and sports changes. You change your whole outlook and perspective on life. And we believe that the foundation, the basic human right is animal protein. And that's why
Right.
generational change is so important to us.
It's so true. It sounds so simple, but it is, and I can attest to that again, just having been in the nutritional world for so many years. Like, just when you start healing the vessel, the body, when you take
Mm-hmm.
care of that and you give it the foundational nutrients it needs, it starts to thrive. And to your point, we're not negating mental illness, but so many of the things that are bookmark, or so many of the issues that we see are really caused by nutritional deficiencies. A lot of them, not all of them, but it just really,
Absolutely.
like,
Yeah.
wow, how much bandwidth can we open up? So y'all can you can be a chain breaker. We all are called to be chain
Yeah.
breakers.
Absolutely.
And it's awesome. I love it. It's also so in line with living from a place of overflow, living from a place of abundance, stewarding what God gave us. And as you think about being a kingdom impact driven leader, there's so many ways, that everything that your hand touches can be used to break
Yes.
chains, to create new normals, to multiply others. And it doesn't mean you need to be the one with your feet on the ground doing the actual labor, but there's so many ways, simple ways to get involved. And so I love that. The other thing I loved about your values, and then I want to shift gears for a
Yeah.
second, was the community centered. And it sounds so simple. Like, sometimes when you just slap these things up on a wall, and I'm kind of harping on these values because y'all know I talk about values a lot and being in integrity with our values. Are we walking it out? But there's, especially in the era that we're in, there is an era of really pushing people to a global movement, a
Mm-hmm.
one world system.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to get into all of that, but it is so important to stay local and really build communities and thrive inside of communities. I mean, that's so key. That's where people thrive. That's where people connect. That's where we get our sense of belonging. So I love that community centered value. So talk to us a little bit more about that, because I think that's something we've really started to get away from in a lot of
Sure.
the world that we're operating in, the structure of technology that and Zoom and
Mm-hmm.
right.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. Yeah. What does that value mean to us? Well, we believe that a shared table can change the world, right? A small group of people can change the world. But what's always at the center of that table? Typically, there's going to be some sort of food, right? You're going to share a table, share drinks, share food. And at that shared table, you can bring families together, you can bring friends together, you can bring colleagues together. And that's what it means to be kind of community centered and centric. To bring a community together around this idea of providing nutrition security, that we aren't leaving other communities behind. There's equal access to animal proteins for all. But really, the root of it was around this idea of creating a shared table with food as the center that brings people together. You think about a family that received a dozen eggs from a food pantry that Saturday morning, they can come together and cook a meal and sit down and talk about their day, right? We look at, and it doesn't even have to be with food insecurity, right? We're all probably likely, if you have children, guilty of this, but sending your kids out the door really quickly with a bar and hopping on the bus, right? But what does the world look like if you come around a table, a shared table, and talk about your day, talk about what's going on in your life, share moments, and it almost always results around sharing a moment around food. So for us,
Yeah.
that's kind of what that meant.
So good. It's so true. And I love it because that's what Jesus did. He was in
Yep.
fellowship all the time. I mean, how many meals, he had with his inner circle and with the people. And even when he was teaching, it was like, oh, there was food, there was celebration. So I think it's so true. And I grew up in Italy. So I have an extra love for small community, good food, because that's really like I grew up in that environment, high
Yeah.
quality, everything from the land, everything was good. And it was slow eating. It was, just really slow eating and enjoying the food and enjoying each other. And it was such like I can't even describe the seeds that were planted, not only for my long-term health and my immune system, which has had a huge effect on my health. Like I knock on wood, I rarely ever get sick. I just had such a solid
Yeah.
immune system, but also just so much around the joy of life, the slowness of life, being able to pause. So anyways, a little sidetrack, but okay, before I started this show, before I hit record, I was asking you, like, how did you get here? Because I know you came from the corporate world,
Hmm.
you're
Hmm.
doing sales, you're doing marketing, you were in the grind, is what I
Yeah.
call it.
Yeah.
Right? The man-made grind, the corporate machine, which by the way, I believe is also getting a call to rise and be restructured. I believe we're in the great reformation of a lot of things. But talk to us about, how did you get to doing what you're doing?
Yeah. So I spent nearly a decade in a corporate environment, from traveling across the country in sales roles to doing marketing roles and then managing products within a corporate organization. And I've always had this common thread of agriculture and helping feed people. But as I started to build my family and get married and have children, um, I just felt like there was something missing, right? Like I wanted to be in control of my future, of my destiny. I didn't want to have a path determined for me. And I wanted to leave a legacy for my kids, right? That they could see this is what dad does every day, right? When I was working in a business that was managing certain products for nitrogen fertilizers, right? My son didn't know what that was, but now he wakes up and he calls me the Eggman, right? Which is a lot of fun. And he likes to tell everybody that my dad, delivers eggs to people, right? And he's
My
understanding what
dad is
it
the egg
means.
delivery
Yeah.
man.
Yes. So like there's a difference to that, right? But I think it's the freedom to build your legacy versus be told what your legacy will be. That was big for me. I
That
knew that,
took a lot
yeah,
of courage, to make that leap.
it did. Well, and I had a very supportive spouse at home who, we really prayed about it, thought about it, talked about it. Is this the right opportunity? Do we want to give up the corporate, benefits and security blanket and the stock options and right all the fun, great things, the retirement match for something that is unknown, right? Don't know if it's going to be successful. Don't know if it's going to have the impact that we want it to have. But we took that leap and we had faith and, really have built a very strong organization with strong values that's impacting the world in a big way and couldn't have made a better decision. And not to say that it's been all roses, right? I mean, I think I was probably 6 months into doing this and I said, I think I made the biggest mistake in my life.
Thank you for being
Yeah,
honest.
I did.
Yeah.
And I realized that it was just a challenge that needed to be addressed. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. In the 3 years that I've really been leading this as a CEO, there hasn't been one thing that has not gone unanswered. I think we're being blessed beyond measure, because the mission and the impact is for the right reasons. The genuineness of the people, the authentic nature of what we do. I think the Lord is blessing us beyond measure, um, and we've been very lucky.
You've
With
been blessed.
Yeah, we have been blessed.
That's called
Yeah,
divine order.
yes, it is
You
for
said
sure.
so much. I want to tap in because these are things that I talk a lot about on this show. And these are issues that come up a lot with people who reach out to work with me, work with us, is that they're wrestling. They're wrestling. They've hit a point in their life where they're just feeling dissatisfied, unfulfilled, like empty, like something is missing. And I think that's what you said. Something is missing.
Yeah,
I have a longing, a craving to do something different. But then there's all these stakes, right? Like I hear this all the time. I can't, I'm going to, tap out and then I'm going to lose the big payout that I'm about to get, or the benefits, or whatever the thing is for life that they're promised. Like there's always something that's keeping them there, that is keeping that in that cage,
Yeah.
and to know that that's true. Like, are you willing to lay that on the table and trust that there's something even better, even bigger, even more aligned and impactful for you? And knowing that you're making that decision when you don't know, like you said, it was totally unknown. You don't know. You don't have all the answers, and you're just following this call or this pull. And I certainly have had that experience in my life so many times. I just felt like God was calling me into something new. And I had like the desire and the longing and also the restlessness at the same time, like a
Yeah.
holy
Yeah.
dissatisfaction. But I didn't have the full picture yet. I didn't have the full strategy, the full roadmap. And so it takes a lot of faith. And I know that, to your point, God met me on the other side of that act of obedience every time, right? The blessing comes on the other side of that
Absolutely. Yeah.
move, is what I can say. And I say that a lot on this show. What would you say to somebody I mean, obviously I've said my piece there, but I know there's people listening that are in that same season, that same seat. What would you say? I mean, obviously you took the leap, so here
Yeah.
you are on the other side. But what would you say to the man or woman who's in that place that feels like they're kind of straddling two worlds and they have the holy dissatisfaction? What wisdom,
Yeah. I
what would
mean, ultimately have wise counsel. I think have supportive, whether it's mentors or spouse or partner at home to help you kind of talk through it, right? Um, Bet on yourself. But you bet on yourself when you have faith in yourself and you have faith in a higher power that's going to be there behind you, right? I think you can't
Mhm.
get lost on, I'm just going to do this because I want to do it. That's not the right answer, right?
No.
At all,
Bad answer.
right? Don't do something out of selfish motivation.
Yeah.
I think you rely on the Lord, right, to help guide you and bring you peace in the decisions that you make. And you may not have full peace, right? You enter it not knowing what is about to come out on the other side, but you know that by golly, it was the right decision to make. I think if you bet on yourself, if you put the work and the effort in and you write down the pros and the cons and you pray about it and you work with your spouse or your partner or wise counsel, mentors that you have, you'll find the peace that you need to make that decision. But I will say that the grass is typically greener on the other side. If you're in a position where you are unsure or you are restless or you are searching, if you find yourself scrolling the LinkedIn jobs, what's available, it might be time to start to, pray about things and think about things, right? And look for that next calling. And, we started a podcast, which was really birthed out of this conversation right here, right? Where passion meets purpose. I
Yes.
wanted to find something that I was passionate about that had purpose for me, um, and I think if you do that, you're going to be successful. And I just had somebody I was talking to the other day who says he thrives on purpose, and I'm like, whoa, like that's awesome,
Hmm.
right? And then I had another person I was talking to who said risk aversion is success aversion, and that hit me harder than I could
Oh,
even like think, right? Like how many times, to your point, in a career move decision have you just not been sure? You're never going to be 100% sure, and if you're risk averse, you won't take the chance to see what success, what impact, what opportunities there are on the other side. And so there is, I think, what makes you less risk averse? It's faith.
come on.
Period.
Say
Right?
that
Yeah.
again. That's the
Yeah.
missing ingredient,
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
What gives you the courage? What gives you the boldness? What gives you the ability to take that step that makes no logical sense,
Yeah.
right? Often financially seems like a really bad, dumb idea to everybody who is of the world and
Yeah.
is, of that thinking. That's why, again, the the good book of life says the way of the spirit is foolishness to man, right? And
Hmm.
the way of the man is foolishness to the spirit, because it's so true. Faith is that ingredient. I love that. Risk aversion is success aversion.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
That hit
true.
me hard. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so good. I heard someone the other day say something similar. I was watching a reel or something. It came across my feed. It was a musical artist. It was a musician, and he was saying, somebody came up to him once and said, like, when did you know that following this call was God's purpose for your life and God's will for your life? He says, I didn't. I'm just doing what I'm passionate about, and then I'm fulfilling God's purpose in the process. Right? And I'm
Yeah.
like, that's it. Like, he gives us these talents, he
Yep.
gives us these skills, he gives us these passions, like, pursue it. And when you have that calling, like, whatever you do will flourish when you dedicate your works to the Lord. Commit your works to the Lord and
Hmm.
you'll succeed. And there's so many different promises. And speaking of promises, I heard you say earlier there wasn't one request that hasn't been fulfilled,
Yep.
and so much more.
Yeah.
Like, how much effort, how much striving, how much grasping has it taken for you to make this business successful?
A lot, right? I mean, I'm a husband. I've got three kids, 7, 5, and 2. I'm lucky to have a spouse who stays at home.
Yeah.
Um, that has allowed me to really dig into this and put all my time, effort, blood, treasure, right? Everything into it to make
Mhm,
it successful for the greater good.
mhm,
Um, I think what makes this unique, right, is that we're a part of a group, and the group is all rooted in John 15:5, right? So if you're familiar with John, John 15:5 is about the vine and the branch. And so that's a constant reminder to us that we must abide in him and we have to be present with him so we can bear a lot of fruit. And that's been something that we've really ingrained in our day to day and in what we do. And we'll go into big meetings and somebody will text and say, hey, prayers up for this, hopefully everything works out, right? Send prayers this way. Like, that's different. You wouldn't get
yeah,
that in a corporate environment.
no,
And you have to kind of train yourself to allow yourself to think in these ways, right? Freely. That, you know, I'm not going to, in a corporate environment, a lot of times you just bet on yourself and you bet on the other people. And in here, it's
mhm,
like, no, no, no. There's higher powers at play and
yeah.
we're going to be successful. But you have to train yourself to really be regimented in that and ask and be humble around your requests. Yeah.
Humility is a
Yes.
sign of nobility. Um, it's good because, it's like I've had Mark and I've had so many moments too. We do have that doubt that creeps in. That's like, oh my gosh, are we doing the right thing? Like, did we do the right thing? And that's human. We're gonna have that. And there's moments of,
Hmm.
I think he didn't promise that there's not going to be pressure, but there's a different sense of peace in the pressure. There's a different sense of provision in the pressure. Even in the last week, we've had promises fulfilled in our business, financial promises, alignment of partnerships that came to us. Like, we did not have to chase and hunt them down. God brought
Yeah.
them to us, and they were dreams and goals for us, but we didn't even know they were in our sphere, and he brought them to us, and they're now coming to fruition at this specific moment in time when we're actually ready to steward it, when we're ready to handle the work, when we're ready to
Hmm.
handle it with our
Hmm.
team and everything. So we've had so much evidence, if God is faithful to his promises, when our heart's in the right place, we're positioned at the right time, doing the right work, and like, he knows what we need before we say a word. If we're just faithful and we move forward and serve well where we're at, uh, he comes through every time, and he cares about our business. He cares about our
Hmm.
marriage.
Hmm.
And I love that you guys really as a couple got together, because you said, like, you and Carolyn, she also stepped away from a traditional
Yeah.
career, which is very world, right? Very rooted in the world system. And you both really made a decision, like, we're not compromising our values to get our needs met.
Right.
Um, can you just share a little bit about that? Are you comfortable sharing a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. So, Carolyn was a news anchor, and we just, I think, really found that over roughly probably 6 years in that business, that it just wasn't quite aligned with our morals and our values. And the trials and tribulations that you face in that industry, right? And so when the headlines don't maybe match what you truly believe, or what, ethically you believe, or if you're faith-based, what you may believe, it can be challenging to share that story, right? And share that news, if there's a lot of just misalignment of values and of faith. And so, for her, she left that industry, the news media industry, and did a couple other odds and end roles, consulting and whatnot, but was really called to be at home and be a mother, and um, raise our children. That was her calling. She's followed her passion, right?
Yeah.
That's with not without its struggles, right? I mean, you go from a dual income family to a single income family, and then add in, okay, we're going to make a major career shift and start do this nonprofit thing. But she's been very true to herself, and what she believed in, and the values that she had, and just realized that it wasn't going to be a long term fit for her, and it wasn't the right fit, during her time doing it. Did she accomplish a dream? Absolutely. Did the dream give her everything she wanted? Not exactly,
Yeah. I think
right?
that's so key. That's so key.
Yeah. Yeah. And we lived it, and it was challenging for her, and it was tough to do, but it was the right decision for her and for our family, and kind of, I guess you could say, the rest is history.
The rest is I just love that part of the story, and I didn't know that, but I love you guys even more now because, well, if you think about it, it's kind of like the American dream, right? One guy's climbing the corporate ladder, the wife is the anchor at the news anchor, so you've got all this, it's very great for our pride and our ego. Like, look at me, I'm
Oh
on
yeah.
TV and I'm up front and I'm this person of influence. And then it's just like the shiny facade, but we don't realize like inside something's not right. We know that I call it the internal civil war, because we're
Yeah.
out there. And in one sense, it seems like we're getting everything we've always wanted, but it's costing us everything about our integrity and our internal alignment. And when we start living out of integrity with our values, we start eroding self trust, self confidence. We
Mm-hmm.
start eroding our sense of identity. So I just want to like commend you both for, holding true to your values, walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Yeah.
And that's really it. And also leaning on each other because I love that she was able to say no to that to go be a stay-at-home mom according to the world. Like, what, you're going to give up this? But it's so beautiful because to me, it's so kingdom. And I'm not saying you need to be a stay-at-home mom to be kingdom because I have a
Right.
business,
Yeah.
but it's really listening to where God is calling you and where you're needed right now and seeing the value system of heaven, the value system. Um, when we pour into our families, we pour into our marriages, we pour into our children, we do aligned work. It's just like, it's good,
Yeah.
To me, that's prosperity.
It is, to the greatest extent, right? And I think one thing that we have to remember is that what's the one constant? What's the one thing that you're always going to be present in? And it's your family, right? I think one thing I've seen leaving the corporate world, and Carolyn leaving a news media role, you're forgotten pretty quick, right? You're replaced really quick. Somebody can step in and do your job tomorrow. And so the importance of being rooted in something you believe in, being rooted in something that your values fit, being rooted in something that's aligned to who you are, that's important, because
Yes.
it's like Major League Baseball, right? You tear your ACL, you're out, and the next person's in, and nobody's asking where you went, right?
Yeah.
One day you go to the restaurant on a Saturday morning and they know who you are, the next week they don't.
And that's when I believe that's what God says when he says, focus on things above and not below. Focus on the
Mm,
things that are eternal, that
yeah,
have permanence, not the things that are fleeting. And as much as it feels good to, collect a big paycheck and be the person, it's like the only thing you even have a chance of taking into heaven is your kids
yeah,
and your loved ones and the people you steward. Like that's really like everything else is, here for a season, gone for a season.
yep,
So I feel like we just circled back to the whole conversation on legacy of like I
yeah.
want to be living out my legacy. So I think that's a good place to end it. What is your definition of legacy?
Oh man. Uh,
I didn't set you up with that question, but I think we're in a season of redefining what legacy means for a lot of people.
Man, that's a great question. What is legacy to me? I think it's going to be leaving a lasting impact on others, right? That's what I wanted my legacy to be, so that my children, my spouse, my friends, my family could see that legacy, stepping out of what was comfortable and doing something that served others, because that's what I was called to do, right? That was my passion. And I felt like my purpose was to serve others. And so the new legacy that we're building within our household is one that's going to hopefully create this generational change in other people's lives. And they'll know, again, the day that the egg carton showed up, the fridge showed up in their community, and it'll change their life and create a new legacy for them, right? That legacy is no longer going to be stuck to poverty, stuck to disinvestment, stuck to food insecurity. It's going to be new trajectory, new opportunities, and moving forward. That's the kind of legacy we want to create.
So good. So good. All right. Well, this was awesome. I love this conversation. So much gold. And I feel like I did get to know you so much more.
Yeah.
Hopefully, I get to meet your lovely wife in person one day at one of our events, or
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll cross at someplace in person. If people want to get involved with Hatch, how do they get involved? Where can they find you? What can they do? I know people are going to be wanting to know.
Yeah.
Um,
Thank you. Yeah. So Hatch, you can find Hatch for Hunger at www.hatchforhunger.com. You can look for us on Facebook and Instagram at Hatch for Hunger, or LinkedIn at Hatch. So you can find more information. Uh, we're going to have Christine and Mark on our podcast, Solving for Why, to learn a little bit more about their why and where passion meets purpose for them. So check out Solving for Why as well. We'll have great guests on there, and just getting involved. Geez, I think Christine, you hit it earlier. Visit your pantry, visit your food bank, understand what the needs are. You help create more opportunities, more access. We'll be there to help make sure there's the right food in the fridge for your community.
Love it. So good. So just to recap, hatchforhunger.com, solve for why, right?
Solving for Why. Yep.
Solving for why is the podcast. We'll drop the link below. And yeah, get out there, go check out, be an observer of what's happening on the streets, inside your community, outside of the comfort of your four walls. And remember that you can be a conduit for change at any level of the game. So, you guys, thank you for tuning in. Daniel, thank you for being here today.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thanks for the opportunity.
So good. You guys, listeners, we love you. I always appreciate you guys tuning into this show. If you have not done so, make sure that you subscribe and review. Leave a review. I read the reviews. I love the reviews. They fill my heart. They make me happy. And it helps to just promote the show, get it out there. You help the algorithm and all that stuff. I just want to encourage you guys to check out the links below to connect with Danny and also to connect with myself. If you are longing for coaching, you are seeking mentorship on the next step, and it may be career change or a season of transition, we're here for you. Until next time, here's to loving fiercely and leading courageously. Bye for now.